Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Will Baggett, Chief Development Officer at Emerging Executives, serving rising leaders in college athletics and beyond. Is your personal brand a reflection of your leadership potential? Well, look no further than our Executive Image Workshop, which has helped thousands master the art of professional presence, and we can do the same for your staff and student athletes. For more information, visit us on the web at www.execimage.org.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is John Shukie. John is the president and co-founder of Forward Progress. Greetings, John. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ty, for having me.
Now, John, I'm glad to have you on again. And of course, president and co-founder of Forward Progress, which you guys started in 2013. You were a former director of academic and membership affairs at the NCAA, spent time with NCAA enforcement, and of course, your background is as a lawyer. Real quick, give us the abbreviated version of what Forward Progress does.
Sure. There's two sides to Forward Progress, the academics and student-athlete leadership. And so I head up the academic side, and we work with schools across the country to make sure that they are best positioned when it comes to NCAA academic rates, specifically APR and graduation rates, and in turn, making sure that all the schools we work with are well positioned to earn revenue distribution from the NCAA.
Academics and student-athlete leadership. Now, the reason I have you on, when we last talked here on the podcast, we talked about the potential for values-based revenue distribution. And it looks like that's going to happen here in the next couple of weeks. We're talking now here kind of at the middle/end of May. I think June 1st here in 2020 is when they'll make those distributions. I want to know if you could give us some background on this academic, or I guess it's sometimes called values-based revenue distribution from the NCAA.
I'd be happy to, and you're right about that timing. We've been talking about this for a few years, but we're coming up here on the first distribution. And really, this came out of a presidential working group that the NCAA put together. And the reason they called it values-based is because they were deciding how to distribute new revenue from the CBS Turner contract and wanted to make those decisions based on what the values of the association are. They chose this new academic revenue distribution based on academics being a core value of the NCAA and academic success of our student athletes. And so this distribution, like you said, will be occurring here on June 1st. Given the current pandemic and the current climate, it's going to be less than it was originally anticipated, given the cancellation of the men's basketball tournament this year. But we're hoping that that's a short-term blip. And but no, it's something we're really excited to finally see being distributed to the members.
That's interesting. Now, what I understand, John, there are three parts to this, to qualifying, I guess, for the academic-based revenue. Can you give us a little detail on that part of it?
Sure. I'd be happy to. And it's important to keep in mind that you don't need to hit all three of these. It's just just one of the three, and you still receive a distribution.
Okay.
The first is based on the academic progress rate, or the APR, and that's if all of your teams average a 985. So you take every team you have, take up their single year APR score, and divide by the number of teams you have and figure out your average that way. The other two are graduation rate based. The first being a 90% graduation success rate for all your athletes, which is an NCAA graduation rate. And then the third method for meeting the distribution is using the federal graduation rate. And if your student athletes graduate at 13% higher than your student body graduated, then you earn the distribution that way. So those are the three methods you can earn the distribution.
So if everybody's doing their things right in terms of being in the classroom and doing what they need to do, then they will get extra, I guess, distribution from the NCAA, just in a simplified form. No?
There is some nuance to it. I guess that where a company like us comes in, where you could be doing a lot of the things right in the classroom, and one or two things might sink you that you're not tracking on. And so that's really where we come in and make sure that you're doing everything right from A to Z. So
thinking about the pandemic, right? We mentioned earlier that this revenue distribution will be probably greatly reduced, but they will still give something in terms of this academic-based revenue. And is it too late, speaking now at the end of May, for people to position themselves academically during the pandemic?
Right. So for this distribution that's going to occur here in a couple weeks, that it is technically too late for that. But it is not too late for next year's distribution, which we're hoping will be back to normal. And depending on the number of schools that meet the mark, we're looking at between $90,000 to $110,000, give or take, for each school. And so when we're thinking about revenue streams and new ones, that's a big one for any of our institutions. So there are a number of things that schools can be doing. One is, and what all the schools who work with us are doing, is you're projecting ahead. So you are figuring out ahead of time what our grad rate numbers are going to be. So many of the schools we work with, we already know what our grad rate numbers are, which is great. We're working ahead in that area. But when it comes to APR, there's a lot that you can be doing right now. If you're an administrator, boots on the ground, what you can be doing. The first is taking advantage of the latitude the NCAA national office staff is giving right now when it comes to student-athlete eligibility. I applaud the NCAA staff for understanding the unique situation that our athletes are being placed in, being forced into distance learning, and they are providing a lot of latitude to our member institutions when it comes to determining eligibility after this spring. And so schools need to be aware of that and be self-applying progress towards degree waivers for their athletes that might be ineligible after the spring if they can point to COVID-19 as the reason for that ineligibility. So that's really the first line of defense, is using the tools the NCAA is giving you right now, being aware of those as a compliance administrator or even an AD, and having those conversations with your compliance and academic staff to make sure that, hey, are we taking advantage of everything the NCAA is offering us here?
In terms of institutions for the distribution coming up here in a couple of weeks or even for next year, can they plan ahead for that based on where they are?
Yes. So right now, graduation rate data, this is purely coincidental, but the graduation rate data for next year's distribution, which again is that $90,000 to $110,000 we're anticipating, that data is actually due June 1st. So completely, the data is due June 1st. You won't actually see the money from that until next June. But if you're projecting ahead of time, you could know right now, today, if you looked at your data, or if you had someone like For Progress look at your data, we could tell you are going to earn a distribution. I think there's a lot of value that athletic directors and other folks will put on that certainty to know, yes, we can put it in the bank, we're going to get a distribution when it comes to grad rates. APR, if you know you're not going to meet one of the grad rate numbers, that's also important to know, because then you know, hey, we need to focus on our APR this year and really strive to hit that 985 average.
Well, thinking about Forward Progress, right? Like I recently saw a couple of institutions who may lose postseason play because of APR. Talk to me a little bit about the assistance that Forward Progress has provided over the last couple of years, preparing specifically for this, and then in a bigger scale, just in general, in terms of APR and graduation rates and those type of things.
So, preparing for the distribution has obviously been a focus. We've had 3 conference-wide agreements, which has taken up a great deal of time, where we work with every school in the conference, visiting campuses, meeting with coaches. Really, coaches are our front line here, and for the first 15 years of the APR system, coaches really haven't had to be too concerned about it as long as their numbers were okay, and the vast majority of coaches and teams were okay with avoiding postseason penalties and such. So we focus with coaches about what strategies they can employ. Across those 3 conferences, Ty, we were really excited. We were able to take, from when we started working with them, the projections had 15 of our 28 schools making a distribution. By the time we finished working with those 3 conferences, we got them to 27 out of 28 schools meeting a distribution. And so we were able to show through digging into their data, showing them some blind spots they might have, some processes the NCAA allows them to undertake that they hadn't undertaken. We were able to get them from point A to point B pretty quickly and really show a financial impact there. So when it comes to distributions, it's been a lot of our focus the last 2 years, but we've got some pretty well-tested and proven strategies to get schools to where they need to be. When it comes to APR generally, we work with a lot of schools. What we like to say, Ty, is that when we work with you, hopefully your name doesn't get on that list that you referenced, right? So the NCAA released the APR publicly, and there were 18 teams that are going to be ineligible for postseason in the 2020-21 academic year. We have worked with teams to get them above that threshold. right? So we're going to go again, same type of approach to distribution, but instead of trying to hit the really high numbers and average 985, we're looking at individual teams and what could be done, what maybe wasn't done to get that team above the 930 threshold and avoid postseason eligibility. So we've taken teams from 920 to say 935, and they don't end up on that press release, which they're very happy about.
Right, and this is important, I guess, for the whole department, specifically athletic directors, when you're talking about postseason play and how it affects student athletes. Who specifically in the department do you work with when you're helping institutions or conferences move towards success in the areas you're talking about?
Usually our main point of contact is going to be the associate AD for compliance or that equivalent position. Some schools will house the APR under their academic staff, so the associate AD for academic support or whatever that might be called on campus. Usually, Ty, we're getting the call from the AD, and then he or she will delegate their primary point of contact to that associate AD.
Do you find, John, that when schools call forward progress, they are in some form of jeopardy of not meeting the NCAA standards or already on some form of list?
It will vary. Now, what we always like to ask is that a school be proactive rather than reactive. That's not always the case, and so it really does vary. Oftentimes we'll get called because even if a school was on that list, they might still be below the numbers going forward, so they can improve going forward. And the NCAA also puts a number of different requirements on a school or a team that's in that position, like APR improvement plans and those sorts of things. And we work with a lot of schools to, if we weren't able to help them, either we weren't engaged or we just couldn't find a way to get the numbers where we want them to be, we still are able to help them going forward and improve. One pretty neat thing that came out, the NCAA released the top 10% of teams in each sport when it comes to APR. And they listed then the top 35 or give or take men's basketball teams. And 3 of those teams in the top 10% of men's basketball at some point have served postseason bans for APR. And so it really shows how people can turn things around by employing, utilizing some new strategies.
All right. Well, it sounds like you and Forward Progress, you guys are doing some good things out there when you focus on 2 things that are very important, which is academics and student athlete leadership. So hopefully people either are listening or people either have used your services or actually don't need your services, right? Which is a good and a bad thing for you guys. But then when you look at what the NCAA is trying to do when they get revenue and then they want to give it back out to the member institutions and conferences in terms of this academic distribution, I think it's a good thing.
It is. It is a true example of putting your money where your mouth is.
Right, exactly. Well, John, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me on again, Ty. I appreciate it.
That was John Shukie. He's the president and co-founder of Forward Progress. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.